This video is called Making Text Safe for HTML. In other words, the code that I write is going to produce HTML. This HTML is going to contain text which is supposed to appear on the web page. This video is about making that page text safe to present. In other words, making sure that it will render as text and look correct. Okay, there are two issues that can cause problems in page text. One of them is HTML reserved characters being used while not intended to render as part of the HTML tags and the HTML syntax. The other one is character encoding issues. These days, most people, when they write code, they write it in UTF-8 encoding. However, the browsers of today still assume that text is ISO, I don't remember the number, 1890 or whatever. It's some ISO standard for character encoding. Now, while this doesn't cause any problems with characters that are lower on the ASCII number scale, characters with higher ASCII numbers can cause problems because they're not the same in UTF-8 as they are in the ISO standards. Okay, so let me just recap. There are two issues with putting page text on a web page. One is the reserved characters, and the other one is characters that can be interpreted differently depending on what the browser thinks the character encode, or depending on the character encoding that the browser uses. Because even if you tell the browser it's UTF-8, it might not care. It'll just assume all page text is some ISO standard. Okay? All right, so let me start off with HTML reserved characters. What are they? HTML reserved characters. Let me put PHP. Certain characters have special significance in HTML and should be represented by HTML entities if they are to preserve their meaning. This function returns a string with these conversions made. If you require all input substrings that have associated named entities to be translated, use HTML entities instead. Okay, so that's HTML special characters. Okay. All right, here are the special characters, the HTML reserved characters. There's ampersand, there's double quotes, there's single quote, there's less than, there's greater than. Okay, so at the very least, or unless you, okay, first of all, let me define what I call page text. I will define the term page text to be any string in your PHP script that's going to be output as will appear in the rendered web page. Okay, text that will appear in the rendered web page. Okay, I will call that page text. Okay, let's say you have a string that is page text. Okay, now if you manually put in all the characters into that string and you know that those characters do not have any HTML reserved characters, then it would probably be safe to send that string as page text, okay, without running a function like HTML special characters on it. Okay. Now, a different situation would be if you have text, like a string that you don't know what's in it, okay? You can't guarantee that it won't have one of the HTML reserved characters. Then, at the very least, you would run the function HTML special characters on it. Now, let's say you have a string which not only may it have special characters, but it may have those high ASCII characters, like the trademark sign or something, or a franc, or some kind of monetary symbol. Okay, then you would need something that's stronger than HTML special entities. Okay, that one is called, this one is called HTML special chars. Okay, the other one is called HTML entities. Okay, that's a different function, and that one will convert any character that is not, an alphanumeric or an underscore or, one of those low ASCII characters. It'll convert just about any other character into its HTML entity. Okay? I'm trying to find an example of a character. Okay, it's any character that's not A through Z, 0 through 9, small a through Z, a space, underscore, or a dash. Any other character will be converted to its HTML entity. Okay, if you don't know what the HTML entities are, I would look it up, but I know what they are and I don't need to go over it again. Okay. Okay, I'll say this one more time. The difference between HTML special chars and HTML entities, those two functions. The main difference between them is that HTML special chars only converts the 4 or 5 HTML reserved characters, okay? Whereas HTML entities converts any high ASCII character into its HTML. If you've ever seen text that shows up funny in the browser, being rendered in the browser, that's probably because the page text had some kind of UTF-8 character in it, and they instead of using the HTML entities for that character, they just put out that character in UTF-8. Okay, so it shows up as some kind of garbled stuff, which is pretty common when you have unscrupulous web developers or coders working on a website. I just want to say that after watching this video, you should go see the video about encoding URLs, because when creating a link, both the URL in the href and the link text need to be rendered HTML safe. In other words, you should run HTML entities or HTML special chars on it. Just go back and look at that code. You may be wondering why the URL for the href has to be HTML safe. Well, it's because if you have one of the 4 or 5 HTML reserved characters in that href URL, then that text shows up in the page source correctly. However, when the web page is rendered from the page source, if there's, for example, a less than sign in that URL, well, the browser is going to look at that and think, okay, that's the beginning of a tag or something. It's not smart enough to realize that, okay, this is part of the href string. It just sees a less than sign as a less than sign, and to the browser, that takes priority and has special meaning, because less than signs are the cornerstone of HTML. Okay, let me show that code. Okay, it's on the page for URL encode. Okay, it's this right here. Okay, notice that the href string, it is recommended to run the HTML special chars on it. Maybe even better to run HTML entities on it. And notice that, of course, you would run HTML special chars on the link text. I also want to mention one thing, that I have a correction for that video about the video about encoding parts of the URL. The correction is there's a function called raw URL encode, which is different from URL encode. That function I had mistakenly stated the space character does not get encoded. Actually, it does, and the code that it uses is %20. Okay, I just wanted to say this in case you don't read the comment I wrote for that video. Okay, I just wanted to add something. The information that I just covered may be kind of dated. There's probably slightly better techniques available these days. I just want to point out one of them, this function mb encode numeric entity. Okay, let me read the paragraph. If the input string passed to this function, and they're talking about the HTML special chars, okay, if the input string passed to this function and the final document share the same character set, this function is sufficient to prepare input for inclusion in most contexts of an HTML document. If, however, the input can represent characters that are not coded, if, however, the input can represent characters that are not coded, this is the important part, in the final document character set, and you wish to retain those characters as numeric or named entities, both this function and the HTML entities, which only encode substrings that have named entity equivalents, may be insufficient. You may have to use mb encode numeric entity instead. Okay, and there's a lot of user contributed examples and code snippets and related HTML functions like these ones, like C also. So before you rush in and write code that you think will produce good HTML, go find out what the community is actually using.